Welcome to Law Subscribed. This is your dedicated news source for all things subscriptions and the law. My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and I believe subscriptions can help bridge the access to justice gap and incentivize attorneys to modernize and scale their practice like never before. In this episode, I interview Whitney Harper. Whitney is a practicing attorney who is also on a mission to end the billable hour. Whitney, through ADVOS Pro, is teaching other lawyers how to ditch the billable hour through a method that is, frankly, very different from mine. But regardless of how it happens, our profession must stop billing time to stay relevant in a world of artificial intelligence. So I was happy to talk to Whitney to learn about what got her to stop billing time and her very calculated and methodical approach to doing so. Thank you to my sponsors, 650 and Gavel. Links to both in the show notes. More on them later. Remember, use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED when signing up. It lets them know you found out about them from the podcast. You get 10% off, and it supports the show. If you're interested in learning how to launch and produce a podcast for your firm, I'm using the Maven platform to teach a cohort-based course starting at the end of December. Seats are limited, so sign up using the link in the show notes. Another way to support the show is to share it with someone you know. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing said is legal, ethical, or financial advice. Without further delay, here's the episode. Whitney Harper, fellow advocate in eliminating the billable hour. Thank you for joining me on Law Subscribed.
Love it. Glad to be here.
So for those of you who have never come across Whitney's stuff before, you'd appreciate the play on words there. But Whitney, just in case they haven't heard of you, go ahead, please introduce yourself to my listeners.
Hey, thanks. I'm Whitney Harper. I am co-founder of ADVOS Legal and ADVOS Pro, where everything is an adventure. You could be an advocate. We could go on for dates with this. ADVOS Legal is a very different kind of law firm. And if it's okay with you, I'll just tell you a little bit about how I got there.
Yeah.
I started in big law and was litigating and kind of living that 0.6 or 0.1 6-minute increment life, right? And then was recruited to go in-house, which was not really a path I had ever thought I would take, but loved it. Loved the in-house gig, really appreciated that shift of thinking where it wasn't about how long it took me to do a thing, but instead was about the value of the thing and whether we should be doing it at all. And if so, how we should be approaching, the solution to the problem that we were facing, really being part of a management team and thinking about law as a tool in business and not just an end unto itself. And that was a really, really fun shift. Professionally, kind of theoretically, right? Thinking about the theory behind what you do, but also just from a day-to-day, what's your experience of life? I very much enjoyed the practice of law when I could think about it more in terms of results, traction. Am I advancing the business to where it needs to go instead of just, did I bill my 8 hours yesterday or, whatever it was. So we were a private equity backed company and we did a lot of mergers and acquisition work, a lot of, rolling up companies and then putting them together in a way that hopefully meant 1 + 1 = 3 instead of 1.5. And really enjoyed that work. And eventually we sold the business and I got to jump over to the other side and take an operational role. And in that role, it was even a further shift, right? So now I'm not the lawyer who's part of a business team. I am actually the client of the legal team and the outside law firms and all that. And thinking about it from a P&L perspective was just very, very different. When I came to the end of that role and was starting to think about what was next, a former colleague introduced me to my current law partner and business partner, Gwen Griggs, and said, for years she had sort of been saying, you and Gwen, you think about things so similarly, but we had never met. So it'd been almost a decade of hearing about Gwen, but never having met her. So then we sit down and Gwen had founded ADVOS Legal about 6 months before I met her. And I remember sitting at lunch with her and saying, she's like, what do you want to do next? And I was like, I don't know, but I'm not going to be at a law firm. And she was just undeterred and knew that she had started something different and had a different vision, but needed a partner to be able to execute on it really well. So she starts telling me that, she's got this concept of a membership model or subscription for being outside general counsel for growth stage companies, which sounded exactly like all the best parts of what I had loved in the previous seats of my career. And so we can put our heads together and partnered up to build ADVOS Legal into a different way to practice law. So that's kind of where we are today.
Now, did she promise you would never have to bill another 6-minute increment in your life, or how was she able to ultimately convince you on the not having to track all your time at all times?
She didn't promise me that. And in fact, we did still bill by the hour for a while we were trying to figure it out because it's such an easy default. And you know this. I mean, if you have to price something on the front end, it takes time to get going. And when you're starting a law firm and you don't have a lot of revenue and you also need to buy groceries, the default of you call me, I'll do the work, I'll bill you for it feels pretty easy. So that was, in the beginning, still part of what we were doing. But we also had some clients who were aware of the problem that is hourly billing and willing to think differently about it with us while we figured out what really worked well. So we pushed our focus toward that set of clients and really said, this is where we want to spend our time and energy. We're going to figure out a model we didn't want to do it ad hoc. We very quickly learned that we didn't want to exhaust ourselves by scoping every project individually, because particularly with our client base, which was and still is growth stage companies, they are agile. Things are coming at them fast. The project they thought they had yesterday is not the same project that we're executing on today. Even if it is the same project, it may look a lot different than we thought it was going to at the beginning. So we needed something that could adapt to changes in scope, but also let us measure the project in some way. We needed to be able to be accountable to ourselves. Am I delivering what I intended to deliver? Right? We're still, I think a lot of lawyers are very type A. We like a gold star. I want to know, did I earn that gold star? And if I'm not tracking billable hours, then I don't really know at the end of the day, did I get there? But we also need the accountability to be able to say to a client, here's what we're going to deliver. Here's what we're going to charge you for it. And here's how you'll know what your fee is going to be. And so that was really kind of the set of parameters that helped us come around to our method, which we now call the P3 method. I'd like to say it had a name all the way through, but it didn't. We only recently named it. But the P3 method is really about sizing your work into deliverables, assigning those deliverables a point value that you almost can think about like tokens in an arcade, right? The skee ball machine might take 1 point, laser tag might take 4, but they're points, or tokens. I can decide how I want to spend them, and they're fungible that way. So
they're not non-fungible tokens, NFTs.
Right. No,
different podcast.
Right?
This is not Law in the Metaverse podcast.
Yeah. We could have been way before our time. It would have been great. No, it really was about like, let's figure out a way for clients who know they're going to need us, but may not know exactly what the scope is going to be at all times, to sort of size what they're going to need and then keep the arrangement flexible enough to work for them and for us, and accountable enough that there was never a question about like, am I getting what I paid for? And that was really, I think in the early days, I don't know if you encounter this much in your world, but as we were trying to get people to shift their thinking away from hourly billing as clients, very often we would sort of get the pushback of, maybe you said it's $1,500, but what would it be if you just tracked your hours and billed me? Right. And that was like, no, we're not going to have that conversation. Because the other side of what was really important to us was we think about the law as a business. And I know that's, gauche, but it's a business, and we intended to be able to get better at it and thereby be more profitable. And better meant leveraging technology, becoming more efficient, being able to delegate, having higher quality starting points, things like checklists and playbooks about what we're doing and how best to get there, all of that stuff where if the client's saying, well, just bill me by the hour, well, now I don't have a whole lot of incentive to do those things. But I wanted that incentive. Like we wanted to be able to play with all the fun toys that are out there, right? There's a ton of really cool tech that we wanted to be able to take advantage of in our practice and deliver better work, but also not lose profitability because of it.
Yeah, I mean that's like the peril of legal tech is if employed to the fullest extent for why it was designed, it's probably going to eliminate billable hours. And that's one of the conversations that's been a through line on this podcast has been how like generative AI and those types of efficient tools are going to really
Yes.
start eliminating billable time, where now the most profitable way you can make money is not going to be billing your time because the clients will demand that you use these tools because they are using these tools and they know how much time it saves them. So that just begs the question then, Whitney, in what way? I mean, you said you want to use all the cool tech tools. Are you looking at generative AI at ADVOS Legal? Is this a tool that you've been incorporating? Not maybe ChatGPT, maybe, Case Text Co-Counsel, some of the legal tools. Like, are you using any? Are you thinking about using any? Like, what's been your thought process on that?
Yeah, we are early adopters of all the things. Like we probably have a trial of everything going at any given moment. And it's been really fun to be freed up to try out all the new tech in the practice because you know that if you find the right fit, it really is going to change your game, right? I mean, it can change the financial profile of your firm. It can change your the quality of your output, your clientele, all those things. One of the coolest things is that we have clients who are into some really sexy tech, right? We've got clients who've been doing AI since AI was born and who are just got off the phone with one earlier. And the advances they're making with the tools they're building are incredible. So, when you are talking to people like that every day and they're interested in your practice and how you're leveraging technology, not only do we get to try out stuff that's on the market, but we also get clients who are kind of spitballing with us what they might think about helping to co-create with us in the practice. So that when you ask like what's the coolest stuff you're doing in practice, even stuff we haven't implemented yet, just the conversations with people who are thinking deeply about practical ways to implement this kind of technology and then thinking about it with us about our firm. That's some of the most fun
Do
stuff
you
that's
think?
on the market though, like Spellbook, I think is the latest thing we've been playing around with. Like that's kind of cool.
And that's been around. I mean, I
Yeah.
demoed Spellbook before ChatGPT came out.
Right.
But do you think, though, that you'd be having those conversations with your clients if you were billing them by the hour?
Absolutely not. No, because we wouldn't, I mean, they'd be off the phone before then. I mean, that's one of the best things about not billing by the hour is that we have real relationships with our clients and we can be part of their team. I think that's true not just for business clients. That happens to be what our practice is. But I mean, I think if you were doing family law and not billing by the hour, if you're doing whatever other estates and trusts or any of the other things, when you remove the ticking clock from the equation and you can just have a human to human conversation, you build great relationship, which is tremendous for repeat business, right? Obviously, it's great on a marketing side. We find that it also makes our clients great referral sources and gatekeepers, right? They know us, they love us, and they will not send us people who will be a poor fit or who we won't enjoy working with. So that's great. But also, when you really know what's going on with your client, even if it doesn't seem like it's necessarily like spot relevant to the issue that you're dealing with, you end up building better solutions with them because you have a sense of their culture, their context, what their risk tolerance is. Like, what are the things they care about short term and long term? And so all of that factors into how you think about the recommendations you'll make on a contract negotiation or, how you want to handle the disgruntled employee who's out saying nasty things about your client or whatever. Just all of that. Like it just makes you better at your job.
So I still am curious though as to how
Mhm.
you got to like subscriptions and you mentioned, you and your co-founder were trying to figure it out, but you're also working with your clients. So is it because they're software companies that were using the subscription model? Like, how was it? Like, was there a light bulb moment where you're like, aha, we're going to do a membership model type thing instead? Like, how did that come to be?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure it was the confluence of lots of those factors. I think some of it was the experience of having been general counsel, and you have a CFO who is always saying, I need to know what the budget is for legal. And, as the lawyer, you're like, I don't know. I'll tell you the month after it happens. Right? Like, wish I knew. And to some degree, there's stuff that happens that you can't, you don't get to choose when someone decides to sue you or, that kind of thing. But to a fairly large degree, you do get a sense of how much legal you're going to need. You might not know whether the balance that it's going to be litigation versus contract negotiations or employee matters or whatever, but you have a sense of the volume and, kind of complexity of what you're doing. And so part of it came from the desire to be able to just like budget out. Like, can I just know that I'm going to pay X per month and that we're going to have a mechanism for knowing how to true up. But I know that my spend is going to be even. And as a business owner too, like, I think about it as general counsel, it would have been nice to have that kind of arrangement. But where I sit now as a business owner, I so appreciate the relationships with service providers and partners who can say, you're going to pay me this, I'm going to deliver these kinds of results at this volume. And like, we can go on about our day, and it makes things easy and predictable. So I think some of it was, and less about the fact that our clients are tech companies with a subscription model.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you find that your clients today were previous clients of attorneys using the billable hour, maybe even of you billing them by the hour? Or are you finding that a number of your clients they've never actually hired attorneys before, maybe first-time founders, something like that, and like they didn't even know about the billable hour? Like, what percentage do you think fall into each one of those categories?
So our 70 to 80% of our revenue in any given month is membership clients, right? So these are just clients who are paying us a flat fee every month. A lot of them have been with us since 2015, 2016. So some longstanding relationships. Of that bunch, the best ones, like the people who are the most loyal clients and the ones who get it and are just rabid fans of what we're doing, are the clients who've been burned by the billable hour. Mm-hmm. And not necessarily by the lawyer, just by the impact of the way that hourly billing kind of put them at odds with their lawyer or put them in a situation where, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, they were kind of found at the back end of a project. If I had known it was going to cost this, we'd never have gone down this path, or we'd handled it all differently or whatever. So, I think there's a good chunk of the client base that really is sort of reacting to hourly billing and going, oh, that was terrible. Mm-hmm. I still need legal support, but I didn't like it that way. Is there a better way? And I mean, honestly, a lot of them are people who sell a professional service, but they've packaged it. And so, when they hear, they might not like inherently say, oh yeah, I do it this way, and so lawyers can too. But when we talk to them about, here's how our membership works, it rings true because it's what they've done too. Right? They've figured out how to take that professional services underlying expertise and turn it into a product that you can know the price of on the front.
Yeah, that made me think of something I'm surprised I've never brought up in a previous podcast episode, because I did major in philosophy, but I am surprised that more lawyers who are representing startups who use subscription or membership-based business models haven't jumped at this before, because Socrates said, I believe it was Socrates, said to know the good is to do the good. And there's two different ways you could look at that. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. It's philosophy, but like one way is just knowing what is good, the good is, however you define that, is enough. Just knowing it is enough. The way that I like to think about it, that I've always thought about that, is if you know what the good is, you cannot do anything other than that thing. And like the way that those businesses, those software companies are packaging their service and selling it on a subscription or membership is so much better than billing time in every conceivable way
Yep.
that how could you not want to use that model for your own business or find a way to do it? Which brings us to like this method that you developed, right? The way that you're doing it. And so you developed it to use for yourself and you thought,
Yep.
hey, this is so useful to us. Maybe other lawyers would find it useful too. Some lawyers, a lot of lawyers have taken that path before, some of them successful, some of them not. So like,
Yeah.
but this is still such a nascent thing, the subscription model for legal services. And the way that you're doing it is, I interview a lot of lawyers on this podcast. The way you're doing it and approaching it is unique. So tell us a little bit more about how you're packaging it for lawyers, and like, have you adapted it in any way? And is teaching it making you better at your law firm job? Like tell us all the good gossip, all about the P3 method.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. Well, first go back to your comment about kind of this Socratic comment of to know the good is to do the good. I think the opposite was also true. When I sat down with Gwen that day at lunch, the first day we met, and she's like, what do you want to do? And I'm thinking, now I have seen the light, can't go back to the dark, right? So like to know the good is to like cut yourself off from the dark. So yeah, I mean, I think for lawyers who really are interested in breaking free from the billable hour, there is a barrier. There's a lot of barriers, honestly. One of which is inertia, right? You've got momentum going. You have a client base that is used to being billed by the hour. Like that's the relationship you've built. And so now you've got to shift it. And that takes effort. And if you don't know how to go shift it, you have to go figure that out. You have to build a way. The best thing for us was that we were starting pretty well from scratch. I mean, we had a little bit of hourly billing revenue, but it was an early enough point in the firm where that what we were turning a little boat, not an aircraft carrier, right? And so, there's this issue of I don't know how, and if I'm going to have to go figure out how and build a method and really and like build a thing that I can go to a client who's already getting services one way and say, here's how we're going to do it, and not have it feel like I'm experimenting on them, right? But I have to go have figured it out in a real way. And people don't have the time to do that when they're also trying to keep their practice going as it stands today. And for some lawyers, it's like they're in big law and they're thinking about making the leap out, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to do that. And it's a similar problem, right? They've got a day job. They've got to keep executing on. So that's one of the issues that we saw as a reason for building this product, and that kind of the method. And the other piece was really a belief, and like in a core way, that the way we practice in the hourly billing model is broken, and it is breaking us as a profession and as humans. And so if we can build the methodology and a framework that we can teach at scale, we actually have a chance at making a dent in the universe, right? We have a chance at helping the profession become healthier, helping it have better relationships with clients, helping lawyers to really enjoy and in fact even love their practice anymore, right? Like there's this little pipe dream where we walk into a cocktail party and people are telling jokes about something other than lawyers, right? That'd be great. So if you think about just like the why behind kind of building the P3 method as a scalable course offering, that's part of it. And to your point of like people have tried and not gotten there, but I think we have enough reason for being to really want to push it.
That is the why for this podcast. You could have taken out everything that you just said and replaced it with the Law Subscribe podcast, and it would have been the same why. So yeah, let's try to improve, the state of the lawyer, and by natural extension, the clients who we serve. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Law is the operating system of society, after all, right? And we are the coders, if you will, of that. And I think that, helping lawyers does help people who are not lawyers as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like it's so interesting because doing this kind of work connects you with people who really do believe that deeply and who want to be part of that solution. And that is super rewarding too, right? Like those connections, those little moments that restore your faith. Hey, that we can get there, we can do it. And so yeah, we built the P3 method as a course offering. We wanted to put the tool in the hands of the people who are hungry to go use it, and built it in a way that would be bite-sized. So it's delivered as 4 modules. Each module is a video with some tools or assets that you get that, depending on the topic of the module, might be a spreadsheet or like a how-to guide, something of that sort. But it's really meant to be very hands-on and fairly high touch. So your module is the video with the assets and tools and some homework, and then a connection point with our team where by Zoom we're, kind of looking each other in the eye and talking about how'd it go, what's confusing to you, what's working really well, where have you experienced pushback, what are you nervous about, like just really kind of a safe space to get some feedback and try out some ideas and that kind of thing. With the idea being that you're going through the course, implementing the P3 method in a small piece of your practice. So, I mentioned the inertia problem and the like not trying to be distracted. We really are doing it in a way that is like, let's pick out a bite-sized piece and go get some wins there and get some muscle memory built so that then you can implement it in additional areas of your practice and let it grow organically without having to bring a practice that's working to a halt in order to implement this new way.
What if a practice isn't working? If you consider the people who are like, I just want to stop billing time yesterday and I want to dive right into the new thing, is that also somebody who could be a good fit, or is it primarily people who just want to tip their toes in the water?
No, I think that can happen, certainly. And everybody's situation is a little different and people's appetites for it are a little different. We encourage people to do it kind of bite-sized first so that we don't end up with, a lawyer who's in an overwhelmed situation, right? Like, oh no, it's my whole practice now. I've got to figure it out. But really, I think if you're the sort of person who's like, full stop, I'm not doing it the old way anymore, and I'm ready to go all in, honestly, like, those are my people. I tend to be a little more of that mindset sometimes. So yeah, I think it could happen that way.
Yeah. I at the time of recording, though, this will be published a few months from now, I'm just starting like the training for the subscription seminar, and I'm taking the exact opposite approach, which is like, I will only take on lawyers who want to ditch the billable hour right now. And, and I'm going to work with you to do that. So, really, like, first of all, it's a totally different approach. So like if one isn't good for the other, we should be referring lawyers back to each other. But I've just taken a totally different approach with it. And that's why I love this podcast, is I love talking to people who are doing the subscription model in their own ways, we're teaching lawyers how to do subscriptions in their own ways. Even the first guest I had, Kim Bennett, she was early to the subscription model, and she has her own course that she teaches lawyers how to do it too. And so just like our client avatars, not every single client is going to be a good fit for our law firms, in the same way that not one model of here's how to do a non-billable hour alternative fee arrangement is going to be right for every lawyer practice. So it's super interesting stuff. And I really want to, I look forward to, as you and I are both going on this journey of teaching other lawyers to do things, to like revisit 6 months from now and be like, hey, let's bring you back on the pod. Let's check in on, training lawyers to use alt fees. Like, let's see how it's going. So we'll definitely do a check back in. But I don't think yet we've heard what the 3 Ps are. Did you? Did you say that? Did I miss it? Because you've been hiding the ball on that, Whitney. Tell us, please. What are the 3 Ps? We're dying to know now.
So it's pricing, pitching, and profitability, right? So it's really about like, how am I going to price the deliverable? Then kind of how do I package and pitch it to a client? which we have found is kind of the sticking point for a lot of people. So a lot of people can kind of figure out how they want to price things, and they get like to the point of, I'm going to go tell another live human about it. And they're like, how do I do this? And what if it, and we lawyer ourselves about it.
Mhm.
What if this and what if that? And, and we think it can be pretty straightforward, but you need to say, you need to really think about it before you go have that conversation. And then profitability is like the holy grail of it, right? So if you get the pricing right and you can pitch it to someone and they say yes, now you've got this incentive to go drive profitability. And part of that is technology, little technology like checklists and playbooks and delegation, all the way up to the big technology like AI and everything in between. But it's also the gamification of yourself, right? The technology of how do I make me as the machine be incentivized to go do the right work. And so that's kind of the performance management piece of it, where you think about, yesterday I used to know that I had done a good day's work by the number of point ones I tacked onto my timesheet. Today, if I don't have point ones, what is it I'm looking for? And so in our world, that's points.
When I went solo, I pivoted from mostly litigation to a transactional-only practice. I did not have a database of documents to automate. That's why a business and employment legal document database and automation tool like 650 is super useful. I can rely on the quality of the documents in 650's database since they're putting excellent legal minds to work curating and updating their documents and automations over time. When you're not billing by the hour, outsourcing and efficiency matters, and 650 can help you scale your practice to get high-quality documents drafted in less time. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at 650.com and when being onboarded to get 10% off. If you're not a business and employment attorney or you have your own documents that you'd prefer to use, then my next sponsor, Gavel, is the automation tool for you. Gavel allows you to build shareable, client-facing workflow and document automations. In other words, Gavel helps you create a legal practice where attorneys can monetize the value they bring clients in productized form and scale via subscriptions and flat fees. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at gavel.io to get 10% off an annual subscription. There's no one right way to automate and scale your practice, but with one or both of my sponsors, 650 and Gavel, you can take your subscription law firm to the next level. Links to both in the show notes. Now back to the show. I think for lawyers who have been billing time for a long time, I think a points type system to help measure things in a very different way, but still measurable way,
Yeah.
I think is super valuable. And it's not something I do at all, which is why I'm also very interested in it. And to like see how that works, because that is a lot of the pushback I get. Then how do I know what I do? How does my client know what I do? And
Yep.
and it makes me think of when I interviewed Lyndon Renwick on the podcast. They were selling, Outhouse Counsel was selling prepackaged time. You're committing to 10 hours a month or however many hours a month, and that way both the law firm can anticipate revenue and the company can anticipate what legal expenses, but they still tracked their time. And so it was like a half step towards subscription. This is like 9/10 of a step, I feel like, because if you're still tracking, you're still tracking a little thing. So like there's, just like you used to go look at a timesheet and see, here's all the things we did for you. But instead of how long did it take, it's a different approach, but you still have that tacking thing. I don't even want to do that. I don't even want to do that, Whitney. I have zero
Well,
desire to even track points personally. But that's just a personal thing.
Interesting with it is, I think there are personality fits on both sides, right? So there are the people who really like, I love to track a thing. And so for me, that works really well. If I didn't have something to track, I think I would be a little bit lost. I would feel a bit adrift.
Mm-hmm.
There are other people for whom the tracking is just terrible, right? And you're probably in that camp. But one of the things that's been interesting is on the client side, the way that the points has shifted kind of the client lawyer interaction, because our points have, a size complexity aspect, but they also have an urgency component. And so if something was a 1-point project to be delivered on a standard timeline, but the client needs it tomorrow, then we can say to the client, that's cool. It'll be 2 points. And we've had clients straight up say, oh yeah, no, I don't actually need it tomorrow. Like 2 weeks is fine. I just meant like, soon. And then, and we actually had somebody confess to us that in the hourly billing world, before he worked with us, he would like call his lawyer. He'd know about a project all week long and call the lawyer like at the last minute on Friday and tell him, I need this thing Monday at 10. And that was his way of containing the possible number of hours that the lawyer could work on it. Right? Like, I know my invoice can't be more than the number of Earth hours between my call and 10 a.m. on Monday. Just like insane, right?
Yeah.
But like that was the way people were gamifying that system. And so if you can say instead, it's this many points, and if you need it urgently, or if I've got to work on it, at midnight, then it costs you more, just like the faster delivery costs more through, UPS.
And this is the
People
part
get
of
it.
the points that I do really like is the gamification side of things,
Yeah.
because I'm a lifelong gamer, though as a father of a young child and a business owner now, I don't have time for that part of my life anymore.
No way.
But I so much of problem solving that I got to expose to at a young age was from playing games, and games have come a long way and they're different. But I do think like some sort of gamification thing, it really helps also keep the clients engaged too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if it does come down to like ultimately how much they're being charged per month or however the structure is, the alternative fee set up, that like there's like a level of strategy there that can be kind of fun and like mentally stimulating too.
Yeah.
So that part seems super appealing to me. So for those attorneys on the fence about it, like, there's that gamification element of it, which in our pre-show talk, that definitely stood out to me as something where I could see a lot of potential. There's something else that you have on your website, on your law firm website, that you advertise, and then also something that we talked about, which is Net Promoter Score, or NPS.
Oh, yes. Let's talk NPS.
So I definitely want to talk about that, because I did just have an interview with somebody yesterday, a subscription attorney, that he'll be the first one who actually ends up bringing up NPS on Law Subscribe, because I kind of just published these in order of recording. But you're the first one I actually talked to about it, because we talked before that interview. And
Yeah.
so surprising that now I've talked to two lawyers who are thinking about NPS. But tell me about Net Promoter Score. Tell our listeners about what it is, because we didn't really cover it too much in the other interview. We just glossed over it, and why you use it, the value of it, and yeah, what's been sort of the results of being able to have that kind of data.
So big picture, we fundamentally believe that you get what you measure. And so you better measure what matters, right? Like that is a core tenet of our law firm and of ADVOS Pro, the technology and kind of methodology firm. If you want, if you're measuring hours, you're going to get hours. If you're measuring points, you're going to get points. When we think about what it is we want our firm to deliver, we kind of settled on pillars. We wanted a thriving team, thrilled clients, strong community, and outsized results. And so in each of those pillars, we started thinking about what is it that actually matters in those things, right? So if I'm thinking about thrilled clients, that's the outcome I want. What is the metric I'm going to measure to know if I'm getting there? And if you look at any sort of customer experience literature out there, Net Promoter Score is the way. And I think the book is The Ultimate Question 2.0 if you're a book studier first. But there's a ton of great articles out there about NPS, great resources. Net Promoter Score is that survey you get from all sorts of companies that says on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend XYZ company to a friend or colleague? Right? That is the question. This is the ultimate question. And the way it works is that if you give a 9 or a 10, you're a promoter. If someone gives you a 6 or below on one of those surveys, they would be likely to be out being negative about you in the marketplace, right? They're certainly not going to recommend you to a friend, and they're probably not just being neutral about you. The way that the scoring works, and I might get this wrong, but I think it's percentage of promoters minus the percentage of detractors. So you basically get negative credit for the detractors, no credit for the neutrals, and positive points for promoters. And you get a numerical score. It's not a percentage, right? So your number score is from negative 100 to positive 100. That is the scale. I think the last report I saw on industry benchmarks had the benchmark for lawyers 38 on a -100 to +100 scale, which is up from the previous benchmark we saw, which I think was like 27 or 28. So, lawyers moved their eyes a little. Something about COVID, people were happier with lawyers in COVID, if I recall. So, 38 is the benchmark. Our NPS score on the law firm side is consistently in the high 90s, which is incredible. That's an unheard of score. And part of that is because we take action on the negatives. We had really early on when we first started measuring NPS, which was probably early 2016, we had a member client who gave us a negative score or a detractor score anyway. And we reached out and said, hey, like, really hate to hear that this was not a great experience for you. Would love to know more about why. Your feedback's really valuable to us. And we ended up having a really good conversation with that former client, that helped us to understand in such a clear way who the right target market for us was. Right. So we got really clear, like, okay, if you aren't a growth stage business, the way that we practice our particular brand of this model isn't a great fit for you. And it really was about kind of the pace of work you need, the regularity of work, and that being on the membership was really needed to be targeted at clients who had a regular pace of work. And that let us pivot the marketing, get really clear about who we were for and who we weren't, and hone in on those clients where we could double down and deliver brilliantly because, we're the kind of weird they need, right? Like, it's been so good for that.
And it's also a lesson in, like, from the marketing side of things, like what you're putting on your website, like you're using NPS, your clients, growth stage startups, growth stage businesses, they're measuring NPS. So you're communicating to them in language that they understand and that they're used to communicating with. It's not, here's where I went to law school. Here's all the things here's all our multiple years of experience combined in such and such law, right?
Yeah.
It's like on your very first page, one of the first things your eyes are drawn to is the net promoter score that you're putting out there.
Yeah.
So, like, just there's a takeaway. Maybe net promoter score isn't for a listener, like, that's not going to work for them as an attorney, but like, take that lesson and like think about who is your client avatar and who's like the people that you want to serve, and communicate to them on the front page of your website, right? Like my website is like $20 a month is where legal advice starts. Like, the people that I'm attracting are like, yes, I want to learn more about that. That sounds really affordable and accessible to me. So like, that's who I'm communicating with, right? So like, that's what I put on my website, because that's the market I'm trying to serve, is the latent legal market of people who like just simply have been priced out of legal services, period.
Right.
But do your equivalent. Another one that comes to mind is the Brandon Leopoldist episode. He would liken his subscription prices that he charged his clients, athletes. He's a sports lawyer. He's like, it's like half of a Range Rover payment or half of a second apartment payment. Because
that's
like,
fantastic.
These are athletes who are well paid, but they're mostly bench warmers, and they have nice things, and like, that's how he would like liken his thing. So like, what's your market? Talk to them in their language. And like, so here's just another fantastic example. And the website will obviously be linked in the show notes, but advoslegal.com for the listeners who want to go and check that out. Let's see here. So we could cover so much more, but we're limited on time. So a question I want to ask you, since you use membership, you do growth stage startups, how do you handle like a multi-jurisdictional practice? Because that's tough. And a lot of lawyers, it's a gray area. And the ABA needs to get on it with the model rules. But like, how do you handle that kind of a thing? Are you getting licensed in multiple jurisdictions? Are you looking at UPL rules? Are you just getting off counsel attorneys? Or are you just like, it's a gray area and we're comfortable operating it?
Yeah. It's at one point we looked at whether we had enough concentration of clients who had needs in certain states that it would make sense to go get licensed elsewhere. For us, it did not make a whole lot of sense to do that. We're in Northeast Florida. And so Georgia is nearby. But for business clients, we found that there was actually more draw heading south into Florida than there was just across the Georgia line. But I know a lot of lawyers in our area who are doing more personal focused work do think about Florida and Georgia licensure. For us, a lot of what we're doing is corporate transaction kind of work where the client's in Florida or the client has, an office in Florida or that kind of thing where the counterparty might be in another state. And if we need to, then we're pulling in co-counsel from partnerships that we've built just through connections over our collective decades of practice. And we've got some great colleagues in town and other firms who maybe handle the litigation. We don't litigate. So often when our clients need to litigate, we have some go-to people who, depending on kind of the character of the litigation, we could find the right person. And those same people will help us if it's New York litigation, for instance, like let's go find the right fit in New York and kind of leveraging the networks of the people in our networks, right? So that's been good. And really the way we practice is as though we were in-house counsel. And so that means we already have a mindset of there is a scope of work that we're going to handle. And then there may be chunks of that or aspects of it where we need to bring in someone who's either a specialist in a particular area or who's licensed in a particular jurisdiction. And so that's really been how we've handled it. But gosh, wouldn't it be nice if that were not a thing anyone had to think about?
Yeah, agreed. And then there's a whole conversation of how do you refer business back and forth on subscription, and like that's a problem that needs to be solved. If there's like, what's the right fee for that referral fee and all that, but that's a whole other interview. Just
I'll
sort
tell
of
you, on the referral fee piece, most of our practice, like there has been no referral fee involved. It's just been like, I want to find, like, if I'm not the right person for the person, I want to find them someone great from our network. And we want to kind of feed the people who we trust and think highly of and big believers and just add value and, rising tide lifts all boats. So there's that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So just sort of rapid fire here, and maybe you
Mhm.
outsource this. I don't know. We didn't talk about it before, but like for like the technology piece, like
Yeah.
how are you powering the recurring charges, like technologically? And then also, I see you mentioned automations and such on the ADVOS Pro website. Like what tools are you recommending or personally using for that type of stuff? Or is any of it custom software that your firm uses?
Yeah. So yes to all of the things. We believe in automating as much as we can. And the nice thing about a membership based practice is that you can kind of set and forget. So in order to do the membership practice, to track the points, all of that, we had to build our own framework. We built it on top of an existing SaaS platform, but we built basically our proprietary methodology into it. And we now license that out to other firms. So in that platform, for instance, when we set up a new membership client, there is a task that automatically generates that says, as part of the client setup, go trigger the invoice to be set up. Today, we have an outsourced finance team who sends their invoices. We use QuickBooks. So they're setting up a recurring invoice that goes out on the first of every month. And it keeps going until we tell them that there's some trigger that we need to change it or stop it or whatever.
So does the client have to manually pay that invoice every month?
Some clients are set up on auto pay.
Mhm.
Some clients trigger their own payments. We have a client who has a checkbook that looks like it's from 1972 that gets, like calligraphy to it every month. So we've got the whole gamut of the thing, right? Nobody's bringing me cash, which is good. But just because we're not in the office and I wouldn't know where to go put that cash, how to get it out of that mailbox. But
Yeah, you're not the first lawyer to still be using QuickBooks. It could be a really powerful tool. My
yeah,
recommendation is force them into autopay. Every single new client that you get, make them sign up on autopay. Like that's just
yeah,
totally streamlines everything. But I appreciate building a brand new business and sort of meeting the clients where they're at. I've definitely had to meet clients where they're at sometimes, and I'm not super happy about it because I built this beautiful client portal thing and like nobody wants to use it. Um,
yeah. Well, and we do have auto pay in QuickBooks,
yeah.
so that's been nice. You can do that.
And then last question for you. Most of the attorneys who I have on this podcast are women and attorneys of color
Yeah.
because the way the profession is set up, the legacy model, the billable hour wasn't made for them. And so, I don't like to mansplain at least as little as I can. And so that's why I love having intelligent, innovative guests like you on my show who could tell us all about why it is that the current system doesn't work for women attorneys or non-traditional looking attorneys and why you felt the need to do it differently.
It's such an important question. And I think there's a lot of reasons. And I am, by the way, good on time. Part of it is, and listen, I won't try to speak for all women. I tend to think I'm maybe not the normal characterization of how women operate. But part of it is that as a professional woman, you are wired to get shit done and to do it efficiently. And yeah, I think there is, I mentioned earlier measuring what matters. I think there is an instinct to spend your time, spend your energy where it matters to you. And my career matters greatly to me. My people matter way more. Right. And so, like, being available to my family, being present with them, not just like I'm in the room, but I'm doing lawyering things, but like actually being present to be with them. Those things are really what matters, right? For me. And I think for a lot of moms in particular, when you're judged by how much time you're spending in the office, how much of that time gets billed, there's a hard conflict there. And that's a hard one to win. And I think that's true for a lot of, like, I don't think that that's true for men, right? Like, I feel like it's almost just a more obvious conflict for women, or maybe it's easier for everyone to accept that as the conflict for us. But
and what I've said in the past, and I'd like to hear what you have to say about it, is I think it's that the women have more courage and are able to say this is just not going to work and leave, as opposed to the men. And maybe it's because the men are not being supportive because that system does kind of work a little bit better for them because it's
yeah,
men who are in charge and making the decisions, right?
yeah,
So that's been my, having talked to so many innovative women on the podcast, I feel like that's been my take on it, is like women are just willing to make that difficult choice and men have not been.
that may be true. I think there's also a piece of it that is when you are not in the mainstream, if you are, and type A is maybe not the right characterization of it, right? But if you're a person who is wired for success and you are not in the mainstream, then you are going to you're going to fight hard, like find every way you can to build success differently, right? I mean, it's just like, okay, well, that channel of the river wasn't made for me, but that's one I can figure out a way to make it over here. And so when you think about like who's innovating, and your observation of the people who are innovating aren't like the kind of the traditional white male. Well, it might be because like they are people who are just finding themselves outside the mainstream, but who are wired to succeed and who are going to go try to figure out how to do that and want to find paths for themselves. And I think, I'm not one to look at it and go like, okay, well, like I'm angry at the system so much as I am wired to think about it like, okay, what can I do with this? Right? Like what's in front of me. Let's go see what we can do. I think there's a lot of people like that where whatever the adversity or the difference in their position is, like they're going to figure out a way, and it's going to be a way that works better for them than whatever was there before.
As a former big law attorney, who had to bill their time, and now having started this innovative practice and are teaching other lawyers to do it too, curious to know what you've thought of all these articles, about like, oh, if you give young associates, because there's all these articles about how women are like leaving big law and like they're not sticking around, even though more women are going to law school than men now.
Mhm.
And less than 20% of big law leadership are women. They're like, oh, you just have to give them something that's valuable, give them mental health and wellness coaches and burnout advisors. I've seen burnout advisors being hired at big law firms. But don't they just need to stop billing their time? Isn't like killing the billable hour the most significant thing that those big law firms can do to like help women stay?
I mean, it really could be. It really could be. I think it goes hand in hand with a shift in the culture though, right? Because it's
Mm,
not just, let me change how I'm billing and that changes everything. And it's actually one of the reasons why we're so focused on small and solo practices and the ADVOS Pro is, we're looking at it and saying, okay, there may be some big firms out there that have an appetite for a shift, but it's a fundamental shift. It changes how you measure people's performance. It changes how you have to think about compensation. It changes how you're going to think about seniority and, where everybody falls in the rank. And when you've got a firm with decades of history and people who have come up under a certain rubric who now you want to change that, that's hard. Right? That's a whole lot harder. And it's a cultural shift, right? You might say, what I really care about is how profitable this attorney is, not how many hours she bills.
hmm
But I don't, when I walk around down the hall, I don't necessarily see the profit. I do see who's in their office, right? And that shift is going to be harder to make. I think it's a step in the right direction. And it's a bigger cultural question within the firm than that, right? If Big Law could shift away from the billable hour, it would be tremendously helpful for women staying in Big Law to get them to stay. But I think it's a step, and there's a whole lot else that goes into it, right? It's a bigger, deeper cultural question within a law firm, and the way that law firms bill is sort of fundamental to all the things in the law firm, right? It speaks to how do we manage performance, how do we measure performance, who gets to advance to partner and who doesn't, how do we retire people, like all of it. So if you wanted to, make that shift in a bigger firm, like there's a whole lot more that goes into it. The other part of it is like, even if we, big law firm, say, we're going to ditch billable hour, we're going to bill on a deliverables basis, or we're going to go to a subscription basis, and we're not going to track anything, like whatever it is. And what we really care about is whether our associates or partners are profitable. If I'm walking around the firm in the afternoon, I can't see whether you're profitable. All I can see is whether you're there. And so that, like, I don't know that shift gets there very quickly, right?
Right.
It'll take time to be able to build a different perspective into a law firm where, frankly, if I'm a female associate in Big Law and I feel like Big Law is not working for me, and I think I also don't love billing by the hour, it's easier for me to just go set up shop or join someone else who's doing it differently than it is for me to sit around and wait for this big law firm to, make this fundamental shift and to really believe that they believe the shift, right? We've seen plenty of firms sort of have an initiative around, we're going to track something different, or we're going to, I don't know, think about things in a more healthy way, but it's sort of lipstick on a pig.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, there is no silver bullet that solves that problem, but I think of it like based on what you said, I think of it almost like how do you treat cancer? You start with chemotherapy. I mean, it depends, right? But like you start with chemotherapy typically, which gets rid of like the big stuff, and then you go to radiation for like the smaller, like invisible pieces. And so I feel like getting rid of the billable hour is like the chemotherapy part. It's like like let's get rid of this, and then we'll build
Yeah.
culture around this shift in how we're providing value and billing for it for our clients. So I still feel like if a licensing body, like if a state or jurisdiction said, okay, we're declaring the billable hours unethical according to the Code of Professional Conduct, I think you would start to see culture shift out of necessity because now
Yeah.
people can't bill their time anymore.
What's interesting is that I think so many lawyers are afraid to make the shift because they think the opposite. They think their state bar requires them to bill by the hour. Right. And that like blows my mind every time I have that conversation with someone, just like fundamentally stops me in my tracks. But it really, I mean, I think the bar associations, man, they owe us one on this one because they've really like put the profession in a position where like a lot of people believe we can't win and that it would be unethical to do so. And I just like that is heartbreaking to me.
Well, we're not going to get any better than that. So my final question for you, Whitney, is a hot dog a sandwich and why?
Oh, closer to a meatloaf than a sandwich. Yeah.
So is that a no?
It's shades of the hot dog, shades of meat tubes.
I'll take it.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll,
And
I'll
I think I'm like I'm probably a yes. I mean, honestly, like I'm a small town Florida kid at heart, right? So hot dogs have always been in my life, and they came in a bun. Oh, there goes sandwich.
All right. There you
Yeah.
go. We have our answer. If people wanted to follow up with you or find you, what's the best way for them to do that?
So the websites, ADVOS Legal and ADVOS Pro, advoslegal.com, advospro.com. My email is whitney@advospro.com. And we're on all the socials on LinkedIn, Insta, I don't know, all the places. Come find us. There is a really easy way to book a quick chat on advospro.com. And so if somebody's just looking to grab some time and catch up, these are our favorite topics. So I really hope people will. I love talking about this, love hearing different perspectives, offering whatever we can to help people figure it out.
Whitney, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt. Really, really fun.
And that's our show. Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for being sponsors. The best way for others to discover the show is for you to share it with somebody you think would find value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn, since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.